Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. Today's Wednesday, January the 22nd. I'm Zach Ewing with Luke Johnson, Rod Walker, and Matthew Paris. Obviously, coming to you virtually, staying off the roads today. Hope everybody is safe and warm out there after the snowstorm, which actually kind of has something to do with the Saints coaching search, which is what we're talking about today, guys. It's like that meme, why can't you be normal? The Saints coaching search can't even be normal at this point.
Yeah, well, we all expected that, right? I mean, if the Saints were in the Bears position where they had Caleb Williams and about $100 million in cap space, it would have been completely normal, But it's not the position they're in right now, which is why Aaron Glenn is coaching in New York without even taking an in-person interview here.
Yeah, so we actually planned to do this podcast around this time anyway, kind of thinking or hoping that we would get some Aaron Glenn and Jets news one way or the other before we went live. And of course, it happened like 15 minutes ago. Adam Schefter, Jordan Schultz, others reporting that Aaron Glenn has become has an agreement with the Jets to become their next head coach. And so the Saints' top target is off the board. This was the guy, Rod, that we all kind of came into this saying, look, if the Saints could get him, that's your choice. He's the number one candidate. He's the obvious guy. He played here. He coached here. Go get Aaron Glenn. And now that's off the table. So now it's time to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, well, he also played with the Jets and also played with the Cowboys. So I mean, he had some options. And the Jaguars, yeah. So he had some options out there. And I think most of us kind of thought that, I don't know, I think when the Jets, they interviewed him first and all indication were that, hey, they were going to make him an offer he couldn't refuse. And I don't think they were going to let him get to New Orleans if they could avoid it. And they were able to do that. So whatever they told him, they really sold him on it, which is, I mean, they don't even have a general manager yet. So, that was impressive they were able to seal the deal and not let him get down to New Orleans.
Yeah.
There were some reports earlier that, that the Jets were kind of his favorite, and maybe they were. I mean, that's who he talked to first. And that it looks like if it would have had to really go bad, I think, for him not to take that job, it seems like.
Yeah. I think the Jets for him are attractive for, I mean, one of the reasons they're really attractive is that he's going to have some studs to work with on that defense. They've got some problems for sure. Like they got kind of a weird ownership situation right now. They've got a long, long history of losing there. I think they have like one winning season in the last 14 or something like that. And they who knows what they're going to do at quarterback, but I think there's some stuff there that makes a lot of sense for him, especially for somebody who spent 8 years of his playing career there. That's where his coaching career started. Or that's at least where his non-playing NFL career started. He was a scout with the Jets, so makes a lot of sense. But the Saints were obviously very, very interested in him, and it's a big blow to them, even though they still have some good candidates left, I think.
Yeah, I almost thought that. I feel like the Saints, if the Saints really wanted him, they almost had to call him before he went to New York and say, look, I know they're going to sell you on something, but we wish you would at least listen to us. But obviously it didn't go like that.
Well, we saw that happen with the Bears in Chicago with Ben Johnson. They on that Monday, they lined up something with Johnson and made him the hire. Now, I do wonder why I wonder if the Saints tried to schedule an interview for Glenn on that Monday, and he decided to wait until Tuesday to take the Jets job. I don't know that for sure, but there was kind of a window to maybe grab him. But complicating matters in this search too is that the Bears had already required the Rooney Rule requirement, which calls for teams to interview at least 2 people of color in person. The Saints haven't filled that yet. I don't know if that applies to Glenn because he's obviously a person of color, but I think you still need to interview 2 people. So the Saints would have filled that requirement this week, but the Jets had already done it.
I think we were talking about this off camera before. I think Mike Kafka does apply. He's part Puerto Rican.
He's Puerto Rican, and Anthony Weaver is black. So,
Yeah.
If it was Anthony Weaver and Aaron Glenn too, that would have applied. But the reason the Jets had already fulfilled this is because they talked to Ron Rivera. They talked to.
Well, they talked to everybody.
They talked to everybody. So I can't. I'm trying to think of the coaches.
They call me Matt. That's why I got this green shirt on today, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Congratulations.
That brings the question. The Saints have to bring people in now to fulfill the Rooney Rule requirements. So Rod, keep the phone on, man, because you might be able to play it into a race. In all seriousness, we talked last week as if Glenn, Mike McCarthy, and Joe Brady were the three favorites for this job, and I think that's accurate. So now with Glenn off the list, do we go to McCarthy and Brady and just say chances are it's one of those two guys, or have y'all's minds changed on that?
I'm not ruling Rizzi out yet.
No, I mean we need to talk about that too, because that's sort of the other half of this, and maybe we can roll that into this discussion. Is Alvin Kamara tweeted out yesterday that his choice for head coach rhymes with fizzy, is what he said. Now he's not being very subtle there, like. Obviously, he doesn't get to make the choice, but the fact that he went public with that and felt comfortable going public with that, and then Cam Jordan kind of backed him up with a quote tweet and all this stuff. I mean, does it mean something, or should we just ignore it as players just liking the guy who was in the locker room last?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys have all been pretty vocal in their support of Darren Rizzi and how much they think they think he did a good job and deserves a realistic chance at being the guy. So like this is really just, to me, it's just backing up what they've said earlier to reporters, just from their own social media profiles. I mean Cam Jordan even 2 weeks ago was tweeting even more like positive stuff about Rizzi. So like this stuff matters for the organization. Like especially if the players were like, if it was Todd Grantham and Cam Jordan going up to the front office saying like, if you hire him, like, you're going to have a mutiny on your hands. That's stuff where it really matters. But I think like players being super vocal behind an interim head coach, I mean, I think it's something we see often, and I don't think we really see it pan out to where it matters like that much in the actual hiring process too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you have to think of the connection between Alvin Kamara and Darren Rizzi as well. One of Rizzi's first moves was to name Kamara captain, something that hadn't been done in the running back's tenure here. Always spoke glowingly about Alvin's commitment and buy-in during this season. So I think he was just standing up for his guy. Those two are close. I don't see, did the Saints ask Alvin to do this? I don't think so. I don't even think he would if they had asked. I don't think he's that type of guy. So, losing Aaron Glenn, I do think is a disappointment, but whether this now strengthens Rizzi's case, I don't know. Let's see what happens with Mike McCarthy first.
I agree with Matt about losing. I said about losing Aaron Glenn.
No, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, not just losing, but the fact they didn't even get a chance to talk to him. I think that's the kind of part that makes it a little worse. I mean, if you brought him in, listened to him, and then he just decided the Jets, I mean, I think that's a little different. But the fact that he just kind of chose the Jets, I think that kind of makes it a little tougher to swallow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they talked to him.
No doubt about it.
I mean, yeah, they had the initial interview, yeah.
At the initial interview, but not in person.
It does seem to me like it was Aaron Glenn's first choice all along to go to New York. I mean, that's really what it feels like, and that's where he is today. So, again, question is, as Christopher just commented, who's going to be the next coach? Like that's the question. And I think, I mean, is it fair to put Mike McCarthy as the most likely at this point? You said Rizzi, Rod. Like, are you putting Rizzi up there with McCarthy?
No, I think McCarthy is probably, if he wants it, I think he can get it. And when the Cowboys decided to, part ways, I think McCarthy kind of jumped to the top of my leaderboard anyway. I just felt like he was a guy that, I mean, we always talk about the Saints and they feel connected to a guy, and he has some history here. So obviously has some head coaching experience, and he's won. I mean, he's won, one Super Bowl, but he's been really consistent. So I think I probably have him as a front runner right now. If he wants the job, I mean, I don't think it would be, he may just decide, I'm just going to sit out and not coach this year. But I think if he wants the job, I think he can get it.
Yeah, I think Rod's spot on. I think if Mike McCarthy wants his job, I think I'd be surprised if it's not him, because I don't think they have any other competition for his services right now either. I don't think the Raiders or Raiders or Jaguars have reached out to him, and I don't think it's necessarily completely out of the realm of possibility that the Cowboys just hire him back after he doesn't find something that he wants, but doubtful. So if he wants to coach next year and he wants to coach here, I think the Saints will make that happen. But I do still think that they're going to do their due diligence on stuff and meet in person with Kafka and Weaver and maybe Joe Brady, and just see if they want to see if those guys blow them away, But to me, it's I think McCarthy has to be the front runner, right? Obviously, saying this without the benefit of sitting in on these interviews, you just look at the body of work and you look at what this organization has valued in the past, and it seems like a pretty obvious fit.
And I don't think his hire would be a disappointment by any means.
I think it'd be a great hire.
Yeah, I think it'd be a strong one. I don't know if I'd go great, but I think it would be a solid place just to, we kind of glossed over this, but I do think it is kind of damning that Glenn chose the Jets over the Saints. Now, I know that there's the sentimental reasons of Glenn playing for the franchise, but he played here too. Basically, if you look at it, he chose one 5-12 team over another, and this 5-12 team is capped out the wazoo. Now, I know everyone kind of makes a big deal of that always, and sometimes in New Orleans we can roll our eyes at it, but I do think it's challenging for whoever comes in here having to navigate that. There's a lack of talent on the defensive side. Luke, that was a great point about the Jets and how they're, very strong defensively. And, the long-term quarterback, what is this going to do? Ultimately, your chances of succeeding in the NFL as a head coach, honestly, it depends on your quarterback. I've seen a lot of coaches rise and fall because they haven't been able to figure out that position. And Aaron Glenn is basically banking on it's going to be easier to fill the quarterback position with the Jets than it is in New Orleans, I think. And I just think, I don't think the Saints are the worst job in the NFL right now, but they have their challenges, and I think Glenn choosing the Jets over the Saints reflects that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we all kind of ranked it the last of the openings. Now there's only 4 left, as you mentioned, Luke. Mike McCarthy probably not going back to Dallas, although that would be objectively hilarious prodigal son story. But he doesn't appear to be a candidate in Las Vegas or Jacksonville. So if he wants to be here, maybe he is the guy. Now there are some other candidates, and we'll get to those in a minute. I do want to let you know that the Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. And we do have to take just a 30-second break, and we'll be back. We'll talk Kafka and Weaver because they are probably getting interviews. I mean, if to satisfy the Rooney Rule, if nothing else. And the Saints were trying to schedule them. And then we'll talk about how this snowstorm is affecting all of that as we continue to react to the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn and what is next for the Saints here on the Saints Insider Podcast.
Nice bike.
Thanks. Can I get it back before Saturday?
That might be tough.
Whoa. Is it just you?
For now, let's take a look.
that? How about you get it?
All right. Welcome back to the Saints Insider Podcast. While you are logged on to YouTube, we appreciate you hanging out with us. Hit the like button, subscribe to our NOLA, Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel as we continue to react to the Jets hiring Aaron Glenn, Alvin Kamara voicing his support for Darren Rizzi, all this stuff going on. And then you kind of have these, I don't want to call them outsider candidates, but maybe further down the board or, again, I don't want to use the word long shot, but I don't know that anyone thinks Anthony Weaver or Mike Kafka is the guy, right, Luke?
I mean, it's hard to do this because from our perspective, all we see is like all we're basing this on is their resume and what stands out to us as traditional like head coach material. And we have no idea what these interviews look like. We have no idea what their plan looks like. We have no idea how charismatic these people are because we've never I've never covered these guys. There might be some things that the Saints are like they really liked about this. Like Sean Payton would have been an outside the box hire in 2006 because he'd been fired as a coordinator and he was like a passing game coordinator for the Cowboys. He might have been like that year's Mike Kafka. So yeah, I think we look at it as saying like, okay, Kafka got his play calling duties stripped away. He's got this kind of a weird resume where he's never really done that, but you like the fact that he came from the Andy Reid tree, even if that hasn't been like particularly successful the last couple of head coaches who've come from it. Weaver is like same sort of deal where he spent a long time. Like he's basically Aaron Glenn, without the years as a coordinator for a very successful team. Right? He had 7 or 8 years in the NFL. He coached under some very prominent coaches, most notably Jim Harbaugh in Baltimore. John Harbaugh, sorry, and he's somebody who's considered a rising star, but he just doesn't have like the skins in the wall yet. He's got 2 seasons as a defensive coordinator, and one of them, like he was fired right after it because the whole coaching staff got turned over. So yeah, it's hard to say, like, to look at these guys and say like, yeah, they should be like a top candidate because of their resume, but like the Saints might see it completely differently because they're getting a chance to meet with them in person and get a larger look at what they could be as a head coach.
I do think they'll have a hard, and I know you don't make these hires based on what you can sell to the fan base, but I think Kafka will be a hard sell just because
yes,
this is a team that scored 11. He's a coordinator for a team that scored 11 points against the Saints in whenever they played. So Saints won that game 14-11. But so I just think that'll be a hard sell to the fan. And again, you don't make these hires based on that. So I agree with everything Luke said about, they might go into interviews and have a plan and a vision that blows Mickey away. So
yeah, I fully agree with you though, Rod. Like honestly, if they hired either of these 2 coordinators who were, I think lower on everybody's radar or completely off their radar, I think I think the fan base would be pretty vocally upset about it.
Yeah.
The weird thing about Kafka is this is now, I think, the 3rd time he's made it to the 2nd round of interviews, and if you make it to the 2nd round, that's normally a pretty good indication. Now it's different this year with the changes to the Rooney Rule, but I think teams probably do see him as future head coaching material. I agree with you guys that I don't think he's earned it yet. I mean, I would be floored if they hired him. Weaver is an interesting one. He of those 2 are, the job he was able to do in Miami this year, where the players had basically come out and said they hated Vic Fangio. Weaver came in there, won them back over, and got that group that's pretty talented to play pretty hard. They finished in the top 10 in a lot of categories. And his history in Baltimore, like that guy, I think will be a head coach sooner or later. And so whether the Saints want to do that now, that's a more interesting gamble than Kafka is, I think. But it still might be a little too early for either of them.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. This kind of brings to mind an interesting comment we got here from James. Can anyone admit the Saints will be hiring their 9th option for head coach and will tell the fan base we got our guy?
Oh, what was
We're
the
not
second
there
part?
yet.
What was the second part of that?
Oh, 0 local meet. Well, here we are. We're acknowledging it, James. We are acknowledging it. So I don't think we're there yet. I think if you hire McCarthy, Rod, like you said, Mike McCarthy, you could make a case he should have been their first choice from the get-go, and maybe he was. Now, if they end up hiring Mike Kafka, it is, to your point, going to feel a little bit more like they hired their 9th. Now, yes, they will say we got our guy no matter who they get, but I don't think that they're on their 9th choice yet.
Guess what?
I don't think it won't get down to 9. It could get down to 5.
There's only been 3 head coaches hired. They didn't try to interview one of them because he was never going to come here. Mike Vrabel also never going to come here because he's coaching the team he played for and won Super Bowls with. And Aaron Glenn is really the only guy they missed out on. Like, they could still get Mike McCarthy. They could still get Joe Brady.
It doesn't matter if you get your first choice or not. I mean, the Commanders lost out on Ben Johnson a year ago. He pulled himself out. The fan base was all upset. They hired Dan Quinn, and now they're in the NFC Championship game, and they don't care about Ben Johnson anymore. Like,
right?
You just have to get the hire right, and if it's not your first, and teams who say, "Oh, this is our first choice, we got their guy," that can still end in a disaster too. You just have to find the right fit.
I just also want to point out that that we have been saying all along that this is not an attractive job.
Right.
Like,
yes.
I just wrote something in our Sunday thing saying, like, hey, there's 5 other teams that need head coaches. There's a chance those other teams could poach somebody the Saints want. Like, it's not an attractive job. They have no cap space. They have an aging roster, and they have the same guy who's been in place since 2002. Who, like, if you don't have a relationship with them, like, it's a hard thing to jump into and work in. I think the only thing that's really working for this in the Saints' favor is that they are committed to winning, and that they have an owner who is committed to doing that and spending money. Whereas
and giving time on the job. I mean, that's another thing. And giving time on the job.
Yeah,
whereas the Raiders could make a coach change every other year. Like, that's
right. To me, I think the Saints are slotted in front of the Raiders and the Jaguars at this point. Jaguars feel like a mess. I mean, like, they have like offensive coordinators saying, like, I'm staying and where I'm staying because I don't want to work there, pulling out of the candidacy for that. And the Raiders, I mean, like, how many head coaches have they had? Just since Dennis Allen, right? They've had like 5 or 6 head coaches. I mean, that's like completely unstable mess over there. I would much rather go work for the Saints and their big problems and work for either of those 2 organizations. So,
and James, there's your other question. What is the worst? Which team is worse than the Saints? The Jaguars, I think, for sure, seem like. I mean, I don't know what the situation is. Liam Cohen could have
Jaguars a better job just because they have Trevor Lawrence, right? But like, Trevor Lawrence has also not delivered on any of his potential because, like, a lot of the other problems in the organization are probably capping that. And, I think it's like there are definitely worse spots than the Saints. I don't think there are many, but there are. But it's all the beauty's always in the eye of the beholder, right? It's depending on, like, Aaron Glenn liked the Jets job. I wouldn't like the Jets job because there's a lot of reasons not to like it. The ownership situation there is a mess too.
Beauty is all on the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Money talks too.
Yeah, that's not nice move. It's too bad it's only a 10 though. You need 50s.
Yeah, I have $12 in my wallet. Life as a journalist.
No doubt. Well, speaking of that, today's transaction segment is sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Okay, so there was one more aspect of this that we haven't really discussed, and that's the storm. And so, this storm has really thrown a wrench in all of this because the Saints were going to get Kafka and Weaver in yesterday. They were going to get Aaron Glenn in today. Obviously, no one's coming in or out of New Orleans right now because of the snow. You could sit here and say the Saints should have gotten Aaron Glenn in Monday, but they knew the storm was coming. But again, if Aaron Glenn, that's a two-way street. If he wanted to go see the Jets first, then there's nothing you could do about that. Um, I guess the question is more existential. Are the Saints being cursed by the weather here, or is this going to have any real effect on this search? I mean, to me, it seems like they're going to get their guy. It may be delayed a little bit, but if they have a guy and they want him and he wants to come here, they're going to get him, whether it's delayed a few days by the weather or not.
Yeah, I don't think the weather affected his search at all. I mean, yeah, they may have got Aaron Glenn in, but like I said earlier, I just think Aaron Glenn. I think the Jets were his first choice, and which is why he listed him first. And I just, even if it didn't snow yesterday, I don't know if he was even making that trip down here. I think he just says, okay, I'm gonna take this guy.
There've been like whispers about Aaron Glenn and the Jets for like a month,
Right?
That stuff doesn't come from nowhere. So I think he just wanted to go there. And if you look at everybody else the Saints have on their candidate list, Joe Brady can't interview in person anywhere. He's in the AFC Championship game. Mike McCarthy has no other interviews lined up. And do Weaver or Kafka, are they candidates anywhere else?
I think they interviewed somewhere, didn't they?
We're forgetting Kellen Moore.
I'm not sure Jacksonville has any candidates right now, so they might become.
I mean, Kellen Moore also still in the playoffs, but I think we're all viewing Kellen Moore as probably going to the Cowboys.
Brian Schottenheimer.
Anyways, all I'm saying is I don't think that I know the Aaron Glenn thing happened, and that is what it is, and now they have to push back their other interviews. But I like it when you look at their candidate list; it doesn't really seem to really truly be affecting anything other than maybe potentially pushing back when they could actually hire a new coach. But all these guys are I think if the Saints wanted any one of these guys, they will still be able to get one despite this weather.
Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. I guess I'll let you guys. Any final thoughts here? We haven't talked a lot about Joe Brady at this point. He can't interview in person until, even if the Bills were to win, he could interview in person next week during the bye week. Is that correct?
He could do it starting Monday, and if
Yeah,
they win,
starting Monday,
he'd have until the 2nd to interview.
So even if the Bills win, he has the bye week where he could interview here. So that's one aspect. Kafka and Weaver, I assume, will have their interviews rescheduled once the weather clears. Mike McCarthy, if he wants to, I assume will interview, and then Darren. But as of this point, it's been 3 weeks since 2.5 weeks since the season ended, and Darren Rizzi is the only in-person interview the Saints have conducted. So we told you this process would be slow. It's probably proven to be even slower than we thought. And then they've also still got to fulfill the Rooney Rule. They've got to interview 2 minority or female candidates in person, and Kafka and Weaver would fulfill that if they get them both done. But right now, let's just kind of go around the room and give final thoughts. Rod, I'm sure that Mickey Loomis doesn't feel like he's at square one, but from an outside perspective looking in, it feels like the Saints are still kind of sitting in square one.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just because they haven't, they just haven't had a chance to talk to these people yet. So I feel like, you see these other teams making these hires. I think people kind of start to panic a little bit, but I think the Saints are still in a pretty good spot. I think they're going to probably still get a candidate that was at the top of their list. So yeah, I think they're fine right now. Now, if the Raiders or the Jags just come out, the Cowboys come in and swoop one of these candidates away, then you should probably be a little concerned. But I think they're fine right now. And we haven't really talked a lot about Joe Brady, but he's the one that he just interested me because I think he's done really well when he's had a really good quarterback, and he did not so well when he didn't have a good quarterback in Carolina. So I guess it kind of depends on, if you think the Saints have a good quarterback and what the situation is on how successful he'd be. So for me, he's kind of that wild card kind of candidate in this.
Matt, you want to
Matt, any fun? Yeah, go ahead.
Dennis Allen's still available. No, just one, you couldn't really begin in-person interviews until Monday anyway because of league rules for coaches under contract. So I don't think the Saints are that delayed in this. And then the wild card, what I think is interesting is there hasn't really been a sense of urgency with McCarthy, which has kind of surprised me. And that the interview is expected to be scheduled, hasn't been finalized yet. But you think of the Bears that had went and interviewed him real fast before they hired Ben Johnson. It just seems that's a little bit more slow moving, and I don't know the reason why that is, but that's kind of maybe the thing I'm interested in watching over the next few days here is when does that interview happen, and how does it go?
I think maybe the reason for that might be because they haven't done anything but virtual interviews to this point.
Right.
You know, they can't make a move on any coaches. Whereas like they haven't done what some of these other teams have done, and that is like interview minority candidates who are not currently working for another team. They haven't interviewed Robert Saleh or Byron Leftwich or whatever. You know, they're actually interviewing working football coaches.
But you could still interview them and then like interview those guys later. The order of it doesn't matter. It's just whether you do it, right?
Well, but like that's what I'm saying is like they haven't like purposely they haven't done what the Patriots did and made a sham out of the Rooney Rule and interview candidates who they have no intention of hiring just for the express purpose of satisfying the Rooney Rule, so they could go out and hire McCarthy today if they wanted to.
Oh, can I add one more thought of? I thought of one more closing thought. I'm interested to see Aaron Glenn's staff in New York and whether Clint Kubiak is a candidate there.
And
I saw he listed as the candidate yesterday by The Athletic.
Something I want to add too is about like Rizzi. Like he's a guy that was reported. You know, they're saying like the Bears may be interested in him as the special teams coordinator. So he's kind of in a weird position here because he's going to have a lot of options, and now he's kind of like got to kind of wait to see if he's going to get this job. I mean, this is probably the one that this is the only head coaching job that. Well, he interviewed with the Jets too, I guess. That's gone now. So I mean, this is the head coaching job that he can get. So he's kind of almost in limbo, just kind of waiting to see what happens. So he's kind of in a weird position, it seems like.
That's a good point.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the longer it stretches on, the more untenable his position becomes because, you know, the Broncos, the Bears may hire special teams coaches if Rizzi wants to sit around and wait. And at some point, you have to make that decision if you're Darren Rizzi, what you want to do. And my take on the McCarthy situation is I'm not sure McCarthy knows what he wants to do next year. Maybe he's biding his time and saying maybe I want a year off like Sean Payton took, or like Bill Belichick took, and then I'll reevaluate my options next offseason. So I think we may still have some twists and turns in this thing, and we will be there to follow them. And we'll be back hopefully Friday with another podcast. Maybe we'll be able to get in person. And we will do some conference championship picks and continue to update the coaching search and maybe some predictions on Saints free agents and what they may do to clear cap space too. So all that's on the table. We appreciate all of you joining us. He's Luke Johnson, Matthew Parrish, and Rod Walker. I'm Zach Ewing, and this has been the Saints Insider Podcast.